death fries.
I said I didn't get any.
Thank you. Your account has been charged. Your balance is 0. Please come back when you can afford to make a purchase.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry you're having
Come on.
trouble.
My kids are starving.
Thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we believe in freedom of ideas, freedom of speech, but above all, we believe in freedom of existence through self-reliance. This station is 100% listener-supported, and as a fundraising promotion, I have a kick-ass free gift for a $100 donation. 35,000 seeds. 25 years in the freezer. Long-term storable, 54 different varieties. So if food prices go crazy, the shit hits the fan, or if you just want to save tons of money every year by creating your own food like I do, grab our seed pack special. Just look for the banner on the homepage at freedomslips.com. Don't be a statistic. Don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solution. We need, as humans, to start taking care of ourselves and not depending on the megacorps to provide unhealthy, nasty food. Included in this package is also a DVD with 900 survival and off-grid living documents and the offline home canning, how to do everything website, all on the DVD. So when you're growing all that food, you know how to can it, store it, preserve it, etc. with all these documents. So thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I hope that you will pick up this package and start learning to be free. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps and freedom is one seed that needs to be planted.
What we doing live? Here goes an eternity.
All right, let's get it going. Are you ready? Are you ready? Let's go! Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. It is 10 p.m. Thursday evening, and we are here live on Studio A. Yeah, you've waited all week for the most cutting-edge topics and guests, and now it is time to deliver. That's right, it's the Stephen D. Kelley Show with your host, Stephen D. Kelley.
Hey everybody, good evening. It's another edition of the Stephen D. Kelley Show, and I am your host, Stephen D. Kelley. Thank you for being with us tonight here on Revolution Radio, www.freedomslips.com. Tonight's going to be an interesting show. My guest tonight is James Robert Wright. He is a young man who is comes from a blue blood background. Pardon me, James. And he was a ex-Mason up to 32nd degree Mason, and he is going to basically share with us some of the insights that he gained and some of the dark secrets that he had access to, and I've certainly got lots of questions for him. Before we start, I want to remind everybody, this is listener-supported radio. We do depend on your donations. Basically, what we need you to do every month at least is go to our site support page or our site support button on our homepage, click it, and do something via PayPal or credit card or whatever you can do. There is no such thing as a small donation. It's all very helpful, and we do depend on it. And there's a lot of great deals that the station owner, Nighthawk, Mike Ringley, has to offer, such as the seed pack and a few other good things. And also we've got some deals where you can purchase CD copies or DVD copies of the entire 2013 season of Your Favorite Host for $30, and he splits that with us. So if you're interested in that, that would be a really nice way to support the station and at the same time show the host, your favorite host, that you appreciate what they're doing also. All right. I also want to remind people that we have a very active chat room that I definitely want to encourage people to explore and get to know some of the people that are in there, the regulars. It's a great way to meet the hosts and chat with them, and it's also a great way to pass questions on to our guests if you would not like to join us. Revolution Radio also has a Facebook page, which I am actively trying to encourage people to visit and hit the like button so that you can have our announcements sent to you on your Facebook page. And that's a great way of knowing who our guests are and keeping up with all the latest at Revolution Radio. During the second half of the show, immediately after the first break, which is going to be in 1 hour, we will be accepting phone calls if you'd like to call in with a question for my guest or myself. And the number for that is area code 347-688-2902. That is the call-in number for Studio A. You can also Skype in using the word Freedom Screen. And our producer, Sean, will hook you right up and take care of you. And we'd be really happy to have you join us. So, anyway, greetings everybody out there, and hello everybody in chat, and good evening, James. Thank you for joining me tonight. How are you doing today?
Oh, well, I've been a little nasally today with some, sinus whatever, but I'm hanging in there with the help of Benadryl, so thanks for having me.
That's now you're in the LA area right now?
We'll call it that. We'll say that I'm somewhere in the Inland Empire.
Oh, all right. Well, I can appreciate that. Inland Empire. That could be anything like Fawtucky or Riverside or
anything anywhere in the Sonoran Desert. Yeah, no, I used to, when I lived in Hollywood, I used to say on air that I lived in Hollywood, and that used to create quite a set of challenges with being located and it not always being so pleasant. So that's why I changed that up a bit.
Yeah, well, I don't always want people to know where I am either, but suffice it to say, I'm in Southern California, and we are getting the Fukushima. So, how are the chemtrails out there today? Did you notice any activity? I mean, that might have had something to do with your nasal condition.
Well, it seems to me that it's the worst in the mornings, and then around sunset, it'll get so thick and frequent that it looks like, like a waffle grid pattern, and it just covers the sunrise and the sunset, making it almost impossible to see. And there's many days when you can sit, if you had a time-lapse camera, it would be much easier to show this for those of us with ADD, but it seems to me that they expand and they end up creating a sort of a cloud cover that reminds me very much of the frequent cloud, overcast days that we had in Dallas, Texas, where I'm from. So, which, as the locals here tell me, is completely abnormal, and they've never seen it in their lives. So,
yeah, well, it's amazing that the young people can just look up there at the sky and think that this is normal. I mean, I'm 50-something years old, and I remember clear skies, so this is ridiculous. Anyway, let me ask you a few questions here. In your bio, it says that you trace your lineage back to the Spencer and St. Clair families, making you cousin to Princess Diana and William Sinclair. So I'm kind of curious. Were you born here in the U.S. or did you spend any time in England?
No, I was born in Dallas to a very aristocratic family. You could say that they were the media moguls of North Texas that owned and were the proprietors of the not only the newspaper but the talk radio and what later became the CBS television affiliate there in the Dallas-Fort Worth marketplace. So quite well connected, and certainly ran with, as a child, I would say that I was the last one age-wise that came in and actually witnessed, the heyday of that, and going, lunches at the country clubs and rubbing elbows with some of the most, wealthy, influential, powerful people of the region of the time. And I mean, the kind of household I grew up in was, something where it would be totally normal to see, LBJ and Lady Bird over to dinner and play bridge. And so there was always quite a pressure on us as kids to obviously be very socially acceptable and refined and everything like that. And then, of course, behind closed doors in my family, it didn't matter if it was my mother's house or any of my aunt's houses, wherever, things were actually quite sick. And it's actually, all these years later, I've read some of the works of like Zachariah Stitchin and David Icke and those type people, and it's very difficult for me to read that stuff because some of it hits pretty close to home, literally, and it's a lot of it just brings up stuff that honestly I think probably the ultimate thing that I would have to do on that note is go through some sort of regression hypnotherapy, but I don't know exactly what that could go one of two ways, so I don't know.
Well, how many generations away from England is your family? I mean, probably not that far, huh?
Not that far in some. There's some that have been here since the 13 colonies and all that, but there are genealogies that come in much more recently, and so I would say as early as the turn of the century, I still had ancestors coming over from England or France.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me just ask you a couple questions about your family real quick. First of all, your mother and father, they're still alive?
My father is not. My mother is, but we have not spoken in 14 years.
Okay, all right. Well, that answers one question. You have brothers and sisters?
I do not.
Okay, so you're an only child?
Yes.
Okay. You're estranged from your mother? Does it have anything to do with becoming disillusioned with the lifestyle or the Masonic roots and all that sort of thing? What caused that disillusionment?
I would say that there never was a disillusionment that was gone through as a series of events. As far back as I can remember, she, we never had a closeness, and then the older I got, the clearer she made it that she never wanted a kid. She felt that my grandfather had sort of forced her into doing it to, continue the bloodline and so on, and I, to use her words, I crashed her party, and so there was no relationship lost. There just never was one. So
that sounds kind of vaguely familiar, I have to say. How old were you when your father died?
The number would be, I believe I was 15, but I never knew him or met him. He'd had a falling out with my family, long story short, and he was basically run out of the state of Texas, which when you had friends like my grandfather, that was something that was very easy and realistic to do to a person. And so I subsequently, when I even learned his identity, I found out that he had committed suicide, and so that was a lost opportunity, I guess, to ever open up that line of communication. And consequently, in having done my genealogy, I figured out not much of my genealogy surprised me, but then what did somewhat surprise me is that my father evidently comes from about as equally of royal as lines as my mother, and he's very heavy and recent in the House of Stuart. So there again, you have this sort of a controlled breeding type theme that goes on with these families, and it's really commonplace. And I think that a lot of the information that's out there, people like to file away as speculation, or that there's no proof of it, or whatever. But I can introduce those people to at least a good 24 people that I'm friends with and in regular contact with, who can lay out the information and the proof in their genealogy to put an end to this question and show that yes, this goes on in the world. Yes, it's tracked. Yes, there are entities such as this mysterious Priory of Sion and et cetera. I mean, this is real stuff. So that's for sure.
Okay, so clearly this influential grandfather, this was your maternal grandfather, obviously.
Yes.
That's interesting because I know a lot of people don't realize, but royal bloodlines tend to get passed down from the mother.
That's true. They believe it has more to do with the mitochondrial DNA. So yeah, that's true.
Right. And there's a lot of examples of this, and just to bother you with that real quick, I know that obviously in the Jewish faith or Hebrew faith, you have to have a Jewish mother, and yet to be Jewish, and yet the rabbis all trace their lineage back through the fathers, and I know through ancient Egyptian beliefs, the pharaohs would actually have to marry a female from within the family, usually a sister or cousin, to keep the royal bloodline going through. A lot of people don't understand that, but definitely some interesting, from a genealogical standpoint. Okay, well, before we get into the Masonic thing, I guess let me just ask you this. Okay, a few people have mentioned, at 31 years, you're 31 right now?
Yes.
Okay. And you reached as high as the 32nd degree, so that's certainly pretty high up there. When did you start this, and how were you brought in? Was it somebody in the family? Did you traditionally you have to request to become part of this, or were you recruited? How did that work?
Well, it was certainly something that was a frequent conversation matter at the dinner table growing up in my family. My grandfather was a 33rd. His painting, which was commissioned by a famous artist named Dimitri Vale, if that says anything, hung over the fireplace at the Dallas Scottish Rite building, if that says anything. So, very prominent, former chairman of the board, the whole 9 yards, and so it was something that was always put to us as kids that, this is highly important, and take it very seriously, and have the utmost respect for it. That sort of country club mentality that we grew up in, and were expected to go on to succeed in or do whatever. And so I was about 23, and obviously my grandfather was long dead, and my grandmother had then been dead for a few years, and my mother and I were already, way out of communication. So the one who sort of ruled the roost for me in my family at that time was one of my aunts, and it was put to me as a suggestion by her very strongly. There was a lot of pressure put on me to do it, don't sit and think about it, just do it. And so I did, and there was a Blue Lodge right within walking distance of her house, and so I went over there and joined, and they were filling out what they call the petition, which is basically the application, and you're listing your personal information and sort of brief family history and all that, and they were, let's just say, very turned on by the fact that I, of all people, had come sashaying through the door, and from that moment forward, I seemed to be, for a great many years there in North Texas, like the sort of poster child for Freemasonry, and was treated as such.
Mm-hmm. Well, if I understand from what I've learned about these things, typically when they bring you in, you become saturated with praise, and then somewhere along the line they withdraw that and they humiliate you, and then they get you to where you'll do anything to get back into the good graces. Kind of a psychological game. Did you go through anything like that?
Yeah, I would say that, a lot of it, 100% of it is psychological games. It is, after all, a CULT cult. For me, though, personally, it never seemed like, because I was always the go-getter and the shiner, and anything I could do, and I was always very eager to please and everything else. So what the tactic that they would use with me was always like the guilt trip. Well, you're doing all this, but you could do all of this more. Like when I came to work at the Supreme Council, finally, the pinnacle of my Masonic career, working 90 hours a week was still not enough. They were expecting me at that point to practically live in the building and sleep on the sofa in my office and, tell me that I should only charge for half of my overtime because, remember, brother, you're still a Mason and Masons still have to donate to Masonry. And so there's always this BS and this pressure. But yeah, what you just described, they definitely pull that tactic with a guy who starts going and then maybe, say, after the apprentice degree or the fellowcraft, or even once he becomes a master mason, just kind of says, you know what, I've had enough, and just pulls back and quits going, then they will definitely track them down if, necessary, on foot if necessary. And then if you're a 32nd degree, that's a whole other ballpark. Then they will really
get nasty.
Skulk you and pressure you, and yeah.
One of the things that I went through, I never became a Mason, but I did have some similar experiences dealing with the Templars and whatnot. And they seem to have a tactic that they use that I'm sure you were exposed to, and that is through this build-up process, they basically tell you that you are superior, you're genetically superior, everyone else is less human than you are, something of this nature. Did you hear that, and did you swallow it, and did you get to the point? I'm getting ahead of myself, but was that part of? I mean, I personally, when I went through that, I rejected it, and I'm just curious if you had a similar sort of experience.
Yes, that is the general attitude in the environment, especially in the higher echelons like the Scottish Rite. Now, they have words for that, and to describe the public. One is the non-Masonic world, and the other is the profane. And this actually, they would deny that, of course, but then last Friday on my new show on People's Internet Radio, Dial M for Mason, I released some leaked audio tapes from some lodge proceedings where they talk that way, and they make it quite clear about how they feel about a great many things, such as the public, such as the media, such as the people learning the truth about them, and everything else. So it's them in their own words describing themselves behind closed doors, with them thinking that no one is listening, and the audio will never be heard again. And it's quite people have described it as groundbreaking. And my producer Vin, he's been just a wonderful help, because I have zero audio engineering skills, and he's been helping me out with that, and we've aired 50 minutes of 6 hours of the stuff so far, and it's been extremely grueling just to get it, because it's real sensitive material, so sensitive that if parts were not bleeped out or edited as we've been having to do to them, it could literally result in innocent parties being harassed further, or even killed, or it could open the door for enormous lawsuits. It could cause divorces. It's big stuff. And I wish that I could tell the listeners right now, go to my website and you can download it right now. It's still not up yet though, but I'm hoping and praying that by the time of my show tomorrow at 1:00 Pacific, that it will be uploaded and people can go and download it. And the only other thing I would say to listeners about that is, please spread the word. Please share the links on social media. Please take a moment of your time and write to somebody in the mainstream media, because, this has to get out. The number one thing that I have dealt with since I've started doing this is censorship. And it takes a lot to shock me, but what has shocked me consistently about this is the level of the censorship involved, and just how fast or how high it goes. This is because if we were talking about Scientology, or if we were talking about the Mormons, or the Jehovah's Witnesses, or the OTO, or the KKK, or any number of these things, with what I've brought out and slammed on the table, evidence-wise, you would have had Anderson Cooper and Oprah Winfrey and Good Morning America and all the rest of these types banging down my front door the very next morning. But because it's Freemasonry we're talking about, no, not so much. And it's been very difficult to get that out. I mean, you're not going to see me as a guest on Coast to Coast AM because there are Masonic producers there in the Burbank studios. So
Me too. They won't have me on there either. Welcome to the club.
Well, shame on them.
I don't know what the heck. All right. Well, okay. Well, first of all, again, 31 years old, so high, you must have jumped multiple levels. I mean, clearly, if you started when you're 15, that's a meteoric rise through the system. I mean, can you tell us?
To clarify, I did not actually start. I was not initiated as an apprentice until 23, and they won't initiate under the age of 18.
Okay. Right.
But I was definitely around the environment, and it was, commonplace.
Well, clearly you were fast-tracked.
Oh, very much so, yes. One, I was a good learner. I soaked up the memorization work of those first 3 degrees, apprentice, fellowcraft, and master very, very quickly, whereas it takes other gentlemen a little bit longer to retain the information because then you have to parlay it back verbatim, and that's how you pass the test, so to speak, and then they advance you to the next degrees 4 through 32 of the Scottish Rite are basically a cakewalk, after the grueling work of the Blue Lodge. But yeah, I did learn it at a pretty fast pace, and they were very pleased by that, and it seemed like every time I turned around that there was some offer being handed me or what have you. So yeah, that was sort of the golden days of my involvement in that arena when things were going exceedingly well for me,
Well, okay, take us back now. What level were you at, and how long were you in it before things started getting a little strange, or something happened that kind of confused you or caused you to think about this whole thing?
Well, I'd seen plenty examples of things that I personally would not agree with as far as behaviors and attitudes with some of the guys I like to call the curmudgeons, because that's what they are. They like to sit around and grumble, and that's basically why they're there. But the real eye-opener stuff started after I'd gotten the paid position on the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite, Southern Jurisdiction. It seemed to spark a lot of jealousy. And so I was at a lodge meeting one night at my mother lodge, meaning the one that I was originally initiated in, and there was a problem going on between it and another lodge that was a tenant in the building, because my lodge was the property owner and another lodge was renting space from it on an alternate evening to have their meetings and so on. And I actually had more friends at that lodge than at my mother lodge, because the other lodge in question was, it was mainly consisted of younger guys, and so I had more in common with them and more friends there and all of that. So I was in this position to where there was an issue that came up over their tenancy in the building, and I was on the side of the people who it was felt at my lodge, like, how dare you, and you should be siding with us. But I wasn't even picking sides, but they were making it a situation like that. And when I went and tried to pull rank and, assert my, for lack of a better phrase, diplomatic credentials from the Scottish Rite and say, gave a speech and said, I think we should just, all simmer down now and get over this and hear them out and try and find a cool, calm, and collected solution to this, then I was just regarded as a blasphemer and sleeping with the enemy and all this stuff. And that's when my problems seemed to start on that level, and then it just sort of spread like a malignant cancer over to my job and my role with the Scottish Rite, because I was very public in the world of Masonry, in that job there, and it seemed like that there was a concerted effort to make my life a living hell at that point, which grew and grew with each passing day. I mean, to the point where I would go into work on a normal day and arrive there about 10 with the hours I was keeping, and things would be fine, and I would go about my day and everything was fine. And then it eventually got to a point where I didn't even want to go anywhere near that office every day because I just couldn't take any more of because it was abusive is what it was. It was targeted harassment, abuse, degradation of the worst, ritualized abuse, gang stalking. You can use all these phrases, and it's ironic to me because you flip on the History Channel and they're there to tell you how they're not a cult, they're not a religion, they're not of this, not of that, and they have no secrets and blah blah blah. But like with that audio that I've leaked last Friday, we put those debates to rest once and for all. So now there's really nothing they can say, and I just really want to stress that it's imperative that this stuff gets out and circulates, because the more people circulate it, the more apt the mainstream media is going to be to actually doing something about it. Because numbers talk.
Well, let me ask you, James, if it wasn't for this jealousy and this professional nonsense that was going on within your organization, do you think everything would have been copacetic? Or I mean, I'm really hoping that you're going to tell me that you were exposed to something evil, and that was what really caused you to go in the direction that you are now.
Well, that was just the start. It goes downhill from there. We're talking a lot of sexual situations, such as, the attitude overall was, the stupidest thing I think I ever heard inside that building was, there's 4,000 members of the Valley of Dallas Scottish Rite, and it was put to me one day in a suggestion by one of the officials that I was the only gay Mason in Dallas.